Live.
We are live. Hello, everyone. It's Heretical Weekends, episode number 3.
Hi.
Um, I'm joined today by Fox in the Know and quite possibly a theological potato if he gets home in time. He's currently in transit
Yep.
on his way
Some
here.
icy Finnish road somewhere, navigating, yeah, through through waist deep snows probably.
we, I told, you know, as awesome as this show is, it's not worth dying over. So I want to make sure that he gets home safe and doesn't rush or do anything, that may endanger himself. So I open up the room to the public. If anyone wants to come in, feel free. This is going to be an open chat this week. Um, and amongst the subjects that we have bandied about, Fox had come up with an interesting subject that he says that he has a pet peeve about. Care to get into that a little bit, Fox?
Yeah. Well, basically, bad, bad thinking skills. Funnily enough, that people who have fundamentalist beliefs seem to also be very susceptible to believing in conspiracy theories, and I think that that's something that's kind of quite dangerous because we're well guarded against the influence of fundamentalist beliefs, but we're still quite new to the growth of conspiracy theories, the phenomenon of ever more acceptable extreme positions on a wide range of things. For example, climate change and skepticism of global warming and skepticism of science in general, vaccines, that kind of thing. There's a big anti-vaxxer push, which is kind of quite scary to look at. And um, generally speaking, I think we may be facing a growing problem with this in the age of the internet, and skeptics and freethinkers should help guard against this. I think we should try to help educate people and show them that actually there's nothing wrong with thinking differently, but it's always a good idea to not just accept the thing that seems the most sensational outcome. Often these things are very mundane and simplistic explanations, and science is not an enemy. It's yeah. So that's basically my opening gambit.
So, in my excitement in starting this thing, I forgot to actually tell everyone what the title is: Conspiracies, Science Skeptics, and Anti-Vaxxers. Oh my! Because I couldn't quite encapsulate everything into one uh, simple category.
Yeah,
Um, I'm not sure what things are like in the UK, but in America, fundamentalism is one of those things that is sort of like the thorn in our shoe, or you know what I mean, like the pebble in your shoe. And it seems like I really hope that you guys don't judge all of us by our G-mans and by our Tommy Halls and that kind of thing, because
hey,
but
come on, no, that's not fair. We have our fair share of nuts.
but there are people that generally do have an overall distrust of science and in general, and would rather subscribe to these like crazy conspiracy theories, and rather than actually take the time to sort of do the research and kind of figure out uh, what the facts actually are. We have what's a good example? So I wasn't gonna get into anti-vaxxers right away, but I read something like a couple weeks ago where there's mercury in certain vaccines,
Yep.
and so I read it. Gosh, I don't have it up, or I wish I could show it, but basically somebody took the word mercury and ran with it, and they're like, mercury is like third or fifth most poisonous element on the planet. It's in the vaccines. They're trying to make us sick. Yada yada yada. Not actually knowing, what how much mercury, what it's, you know what I mean? Like they think
Yeah.
it's mercury in your thermometer, and they kind of just pour it in a test tube or something. Like I don't know what they're thinking, but literally no chemistry background, no biology background, no medical background.
Yeah. I think there's a similar issue with formaldehyde in vaccines as well, because obviously there was a health scare in the past. I think it was babies born in the 50s where mothers got formaldehyde, and this led to birth defects. So formaldehyde has a bad press. The problem is that the body for DNA synthesis produces something like 1,000 times more a day per day than is in a standard vaccine shot. So it is a conflation of scary words in chemistry that we have learned not incorrectly to associate with having negative effects in certain contexts. Um, and then we hear those things are in the vaccines, and we first of all we don't know why they're there. We don't no one bothers to research why they are there. So we assume that maybe someone's trying to sneak them in there for some ulterior motive. And it's often the case that when people, from my experience, when people fall into conspiracy theories, they will come across something which seems quite innocuous to people who don't fall for the theories. They'll come across something which just sticks out and is in need of further explanation. Something like in the 9/11 conspiracies, where World Trade Center number 7. Most people who are not that particularly conspiracy theory minded would just accept the official explanation, but certain people would see that, and although there are good explanations for why that building fell, um, that would have been the hook, that would have been the gateway standout thing. Just like when people look at the ingredients that go into vaccines and they see these things like formaldehyde or mercury, they know from different contexts that those things are really bad. That's often the spark that ignites this further and further entrenchment into the conspiratorial frame of mind, where you have it's similar to theists, fundamentalist theists who will accept absolutely no criticism of the literal truth of their holy book. There'll be endless ad hoc justifications. So you will try to present a counter objection. They'll come up with something else, and it's often that they've already been lost to this mindset before. So it's very difficult to get people out of it. But as for the UK, compared to the US, we probably don't have the same percentage of people who would believe in conspiracy theories, but we do have plenty of our own homegrown conspiracies. I mean, there are plenty of people who think. I mean, look at David Icke, for example. I don't know if you're familiar with David Icke, but he's one of the biggest selling peddlers of bullshit going, and his conspiracies are really wacky out there. The royal family and lizards, that kind of stuff. I mean, that he was British. There are plenty of people who believe that Princess Diana was killed by the royal family. Andrew Wakefield was a British. I think he was a British doctor, or it may have been an actual professor of the science. I can't remember which one it was. So we have plenty of people who in this country can produce nonsense, but they don't tend to gain the kind of widespread notoriety of people like Alex Jones. They're always a bit kooky people. So someone like David Icke would probably get a far bigger response in the US than he would do in the UK. It's a little bit unseemly. British, I think it's maybe a difference in the British mentality, and obviously a difference in the relationship towards fundamentalism in Britain. We don't have as big a fundamentalist. Um, it's not a fringe because in America it seems to be quite a substantial percentage of the population. It's just not the case. But we do have weaknesses and susceptibilities to thinking these bad theories hold some water. So yeah, it's
Do you guys have in the UK? Do you have the chemtrail conspiracy?
there will be people who believe in it. Um, I have seen there are a few. I mean, in the UK we do have there are a few like dodgy programs on various obscure satellite TV channels where people will talk about things like chemtrails, UFOs, that kind of thing. They're quite rare. There's not as many as there are in America, but there are definitely people there who think things like we
Lucky.
had we had 7/7 bombings in the UK in London. There's some bombs on the underground, and there are people there there are people who are convinced that that was an MI5 conspiracy. Um, but often these people don't seem to be overtly religious, or at least not. They might be a bit more. They're more like to be New Age than they are kind of fundamentalist
Right.
Christians.
Well,
But they,
I got the before the show. I brought up a video that came out a few months ago. Actually, it came out in I think November or something, like a little bit late last year. And you said you hadn't seen it. So this is a fundamentalist Christian in this in this country that um, is promoting the idea that Monster energy drinks are from Satan. And you said you hadn't seen it, and it's pretty hilarious. So I'm gonna screen share it.
they work for Red Bull by any chance?
What was that?
They work for Red Bull.
But here, let me see if you could. Can you can you see that?
Yep.
Oh, you can. Okay. Keep in mind, I'm kind of new at this, and feel free just to chime in. I'll pause, or if you want to talk, I'll pause. So here you go.
Cool.
Look at your M. There's a gap right here in the letter M. It's never connected. So you go into Hebrew. The letter Vav is also the number 6. Short top, long tail. Short top, long tail. You could have here in Hebrew 666 on the page. But my interest is the word monster. What do you see in the O? There's a cross. Okay. What has Christ got to do with an energy drink, let alone the name monster? So I thought, well, maybe this is a Christian company then. BFC at the bottom of the can. Do you know what that stands for? That's the F word. Big can. In fact, they write it on the side of the can, so I know that's the F word. Okay. Now, do you know what a MILF is? Yes. MILF and this is not a Christian company at all. So why would they have a cross on the can? Here's the message. Anti-Christ. 666 in Hebrew. And then the Bible talks about the beast in Revelation. And look at monster's hand. This is Christian. You see these M's everywhere. Hats, t-shirts, bumper stickers. This is another agenda. If God can use people in product, so can Satan. And look at this.
Wow.
Even is not the issue. You cannot deny that that is a cross. And what is witchcraft? When the cross goes upside down, bottoms up, and the devil laughs. This is how clever Satan is, and how he gets into the Christian home and a Christian's life, and it breaks that heart. Jesus said, "My people perish for
Wow.
So, what do you think?
Well, is it actually genuine, or is it some kind of viral marketing campaign by Monster energy drinks? That's the
I
question.
think so. This made the news, and it went. It did go viral pretty fast, but
Yeah.
it's
But it's not surprising that this is it's Poe's law in action. You can never tell. So it doesn't really matter even if it turned out that it was a conspiracy, because there are plenty of people out there who believe equally ridiculous nonsense. I mean, there's lots of belief that pop star videos contain Illuminati bullshit stuff. It's just people people recognize patterns everywhere. I think we are pattern recognition animals, and so we can't do away with that entirely. But at the same time, what happens to someone's mind to completely saturate their view of the world, that something as innocuous as an energy drink can be seen as being the work of Satan, is, I mean, there's something kind of worrying there, isn't it? It's not that far from the extremist views of people in ISIS who think that music and statues need to be destroyed because they're causing offence to an all-powerful um, supernatural being. So it permeates this the way of that this bad thinking permeates all walks of life, and it's it's funny, but at the same time it's ridiculous. It's kind of scary as well.
Right.
So I just think it's something that we need to be a little bit more aware of. That in the age of the internet, anybody can connect up with anyone else who is also thinking the same kind of ridiculous paranoid fantasies that they are, and then all of a sudden they can start to build momentum. And I think someone like Alex Jones is a good example of this, because I think he's been around for a long time, and he used to just do the radio before the rise of the internet. He was a bit of a local kook. Then the internet really takes off, and people from all around the world are tuning in their millions to listen to this guy peddle often kind of quite dangerous nonsense. He's not a scientist. He doesn't know if vaccines work or not, but he has an opinion on them, and other people will swallow that whole. And all of a sudden, you've got outbreaks of diseases that we thought we were pushing back and keeping at bay, and it's worrying that happens. Um, when you hear, I think one of the best examples I've heard on G Plus is from that guy Tommy Hall. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Oh my God, dude.
And I remember watching a hangout where he said that if Ebola, if the Ebola outbreak spread around the world, and it reached the United States, and there was a vaccine that he could take that would potentially cure him of Ebola, he said he would rather take his chances with getting infected with Ebola. I mean, that's just kind of obscene when you think about there are people dying in the most horrendous conditions still. The outbreaks thankfully has subsided quite substantially, but people are still dying in Africa in the most terrible, horrific manner. And Ebola is such a difficult disease to prevent from spreading that anyone who was aware of what it was, for them to say that they wouldn't take a vaccine, they take their chances with getting that horrible disease. That kind of thinking to me is just completely bizarre. In that sense, I mean, he may just be lying about it. He might just be talking about hypotheticals and what he'd do. But you do wonder, don't you, if how serious these people are. I mean, often it is the case that the moment something goes wrong, they're all quite happy for science to just kind of save their asses. But they'll happily deride scientific progress and scientific achievement wherever it conflicts with the paranoid fantasies. There's quite. I think there's a Simpsons clip that quite brilliantly highlights that, where I think they're going to trash the museum because they're sick of science, because science is. Is it the one where the Lisa they find the angel skeleton or something, and then they say that science is trying to disprove the angel, and the mob goes to break down the museum, and they end up. I think it's more does something like they break a mammoth and a tusk lands on him, and before that he's going, down with science like that, and then as he gets crushed by the tusk, he said, I only hope that medical science can save me.
It's actually funny that you bring that up, because one of my favorite fundamentalist conspiracy theories is this. They don't talk about this much anymore, but I remember in the early days of Arcane Douche and all those guys, because Arcane is one of those guys that I believe he has said that the pyramids couldn't possibly be built by humans, and it required these giants, the Nephilim or whatever.
Yeah.
And they get into, yeah, it's one of those things where it's like he sees a Photoshop picture and would rather go with that.
Yeah, yeah,
And or he looks on web pages that have this, it's the sharpshooter fallacy. He's looking for web pages that
yeah,
look that has this stuff and agrees with him, and and it's sort, if it's not if it's not the government, it's the Illuminati, or it's the people that are
yeah.
anti-church, or and I don't understand how people suspend critical thinking that long. I don't understand how people can actually sit there and go, gee, what's more likely, that they're actual giants and giant skeletons, being covered up, or the pyramids were built by people.
I
Um, do you remember do you know the Easter Island heads?
Yes.
Did you see how they move those?
Um, no, but there's similar sort of things have been said about Stonehenge as well in England. People have often thought, well, how these rocks are too big for humans to get together and move them. The big problem is it's always the assumption that ancient man was stupid and couldn't think of particularly innovative ways of moving very big, heavy things with lots of slaves.
Yeah.
That's just the thing that couldn't happen. No, it's far more ancient aliens. Ancient aliens did it, you know.
Yeah, right. I have a friend at work who's religious, and um, I just kind of a Christopher Hitchens thing, and I was like, what's more likely, that an all-powerful deity suspended the laws of physics, for your benefit, or you were mistaken, Do you
Yeah,
ever,
I
yeah.
think the mentioning the ancient alien thing, the History Channel has got quite a lot of well, not just the History Channel, it's most of the supposed documentary channels. They have quite a lot of to answer with this because they do make these things seem more mainstream. And it's a form of entertainment. It's a form of it's quite titillating to think that these bizarre out there things could be true, and there is that people often have bought these things because they like the look of them before rather than they've arrived at at the conclusion that this is true because the evidence shows it. So it is by almost by definition people buy the conspiracy theory before they unpack it and take it out and see what's actually in the box and realize that this doesn't actually it isn't what it says on the tin. So that seems to be the case, and we have within our culture this almost semi-legitimate um, media which finds that these things sell quite well and people enjoy watching programs about
Oh yeah.
ancient aliens and to me I just think these things feed into each other. I mean, the idea that alien creatures could breed with mankind, and there is a huge tenth planet out there that is possibly moving close to the Earth. I mean, these things they don't make any sense in terms of physics or biology, and apart from the fact they have no evidence to support them anyway. And the worrying thing is when you perpetrate those things as being even slightly credible, then you as a knock-on effect, you denigrate science, you denigrate genetics. I mean, if you know anything more about genetics and how DNA works, you realize that you can't cross a human with a rabbit, and these are two animals which are could be far more closely related than humans and space creatures. Although, of course, there's always some kind of backward justification again of saying, well, they originated us, or whatever it is. Or they're demons, actually. That's often the way that religion often tries to appropriate even conspiracy theories. I used to be quite interested in people who, because when I was a kid, I really loved the X Files. It was like a major
Oh, that was my
TV show
favorite
for me.
show.
And again, I never really bought into any of it. But you always kind of, you always wondered, well, what if some of this was true? Which I don't think is absolutely. I think that's not a wrong way to approach these kind of subjects. Have an open mind, but not so open that your brains fall out. So I always wondered, well, what if, and people would comment on things and give. You would find there was some religious people in there who would say, well, no, these aliens they're just demons. UFOs are just, these are just demonic vessels, and they come up from hell, and you're not really from space, and that's just a conspiracy on top of a conspiracy.
Right.
And so, I find it very. I personally find it very difficult to keep these things separate in your mind, and often what you find is people who believe in conspiracy theories will believe in pretty much all of them because it's very hard to get. Like, of course, there is an Illuminati and aliens are real, but it's just stupid to say that they're demons or that there used to be giants. Come on, there's no evidence for it. I mean, it's just obvious, isn't it? It's a contradiction that a lot of people can't do that much cognitive dissonance. It's just too difficult. So they leave themselves open to susceptible to other hypotheses, even if they are slightly contradictory, or even if they are more and more ridiculous. It kind of snowballs. So you get people who look at things like 9/11 and will think, well, yeah, I mean that's just such a strange thing to happen, and how could that have happened without anybody knowing? And well, the government do bad things all the time. Maybe, just maybe, the people who have made these videos like Short Change or whatever it is, maybe they've got a point. And then it starts from there, and then it builds and builds and builds and builds, and along the way, you may have bought into some quite dangerous ideas, I guess, and they might have a significant impact on the rest of society at large. So it's not just a few kooks who happen to believe some crazy things, because that might almost even be slightly endearing. And I don't think, like I said, I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with having an open mind. People, people who say that they're like cryptozoologists, and they go out looking for the Loch Ness monster or something. I think there's something quite sweet about that. Then they will always say things like, well, there's so many species out there that we've never discovered, and what if this creature did exist out there? And the thing is, they're poking around a Scottish loch with a few salmon in it, hoping to find a plesiosaur or something. I mean, it's just ridiculous, but there's something kind of romantic and quite nice about that. But they will at least make some attempt to do some kind of scientific research.
The guy that took, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say the guy that took the original picture of the Loch Ness monster already said that picture wasn't real.
Yeah.
And people are still out there. Oh, I wanted to show you what we touched real quick on like Stonehenge or whatever. I wanted to show you this because this was a video from a group of scientists figured with just humans how to move a giant statue. No aliens needed.
I don't know. There might be a few invisible tractor beams pulling that thing along.
It's kind of my I have a love-hate relationship with the National Geographic Channel because sometimes they do stuff like that and I'm like, oh cool, they've actually are debunking things, and then they do shows like Mermaids Are Real and they do the fake documentary, but with fake video,
Nazi UFOs, that kind of thing.
Yeah, or they do stuff like Bigfoot or they do shows in America all the time where it's like monster hunters and they got people skulking around the woods with like night vision, cameras. And they're doing this, and they're,
But I think the other thing to bear in mind with that kind of form of entertainment is that it is in and of itself the best reason not to take these things seriously, because there actually are a lot of people out there who are not a part of the scientific conspiracy to repress the truth, but actually genuinely want these things to be true, and then they go out there and they try and find these things, and what do you know? So time again, they fail to do it. I mean, how many hundreds of of documentary series around the world have been made trying to find the truth of these things, and we never get any closer. As I always think that the best evidence, like for example, it's not necessarily a conspiracy, but something that people believe and they probably shouldn't do, the existence of ghosts, for example. The best argument against the existence of ghosts are people who go out there hunting for ghosts, because if all the best they can come up with is a few dust particles that they think are orbs, or a few blurry photographs that are, something that could have been the wind and the fog, and how many thousands and thousands of man-hours have these people been out in these supposedly haunted locations with cameras and thermal imaging devices and microphones and all the rest of it, and they've come up with something which doesn't hold a lot of water. So at least as an end result of this attempt to falsify I wouldn't dare call it the hypothesis of ghosts, but there are various bits and pieces of theory that float around about how these things could potentially work. Well, there we go. We've got all this evidence that these things really probably don't actually exist. So if you watch a series of Ghost Hunters or something like that, um, if you're not completely bought into it, if you've not lost all of your kind of skeptical faculties, you might find it a little bit titillating, a little bit exhilarating to think, oh, what was that? The way that they edit these programs together. But really, if you're honest, as an assessment of watching the whole series, you go, yeah, I didn't really have anything there. So I don't have a problem with people out there, trying to put forward proofs for things like conspiracy theories in general. But I think what often happens with some of the more serious ones is people will things will get very complicated. I mean, the science behind vaccines is not something that you will just be able to intuitively pick up. You have to have some training in biology. You had to have been one of the people who listened in your biology class when they taught you about vaccines. I mean, that's something that happened. I hope this is going to happen in the US. It definitely happens in the UK. We are taught the principles behind vaccines. In fact, at history, you'll be taught how the vaccination process came around, and vacca being Latin for cow, and how cowpox and smallpox vaccines were created. You'll get a little bit of background from the history of it, and also a little bit of the science behind it. And I'm not saying you have to have particularly advanced understanding, but you have to know some of the information around it. But if someone puts out something which it looks kind of professional, quite slick, and dazzles you with pseudoscience, and you don't have the resources to know that no, that's not how I remember being taught it in class, you are more likely to fall for it. Similarly with 9/11 documentaries, they're very slick, they're well produced. People will seem like they're being honest and that they've actually put some serious research and thought into it. And we're not all structural engineers, we're not all physicists. We don't all know about melting temperatures of various elements. And the further we go down this rabbit hole, and the more and more people who are scientific experts try to counter the nonsense put forward by these positions, the more and more entrenched, I guess, the people who really want to believe it will be, because they will scramble around for any ad hoc justification. And someone like Tommy Hall is a perfect example. I've seen him in hangouts with people like Fiona Robertson, who is pretty awesome and knows what she's talking about.
Yeah.
Tell him why he's wrong, and you could almost see some part of his brain knows it's wrong, but he has already decided to discount it. And I think that's really kind of quite dangerous. And that point,
Well,
that guy. Sorry.
Oh no, no worries. I was about to say that one, he's fucking retarded, so that could probably be an issue. But
There is
two,
that.
two, and I realize when it comes to people like Tommy Hall, I just there's certain aspects of my logic I throw out the window. Like I have no problem poisoning the well when it comes to Tommy Hall. I have no problem. I have no problem. I have a problem with ad hominem on Tommy Hall, because I can't bring myself to literally say, "Wow, I'm gonna get all my science education from a guy that fucking mows lawns for a living." I just can't do it. I can't bring myself to do it. I'm gonna take Fiona much more seriously because, well, her having a PhD and all, and actually work in this field, probably lends a little more credibility.
But one of the problems with this, particularly with the relationship towards fundamentalist theistic beliefs, is there is already within the defense mechanisms of remaining, true to those fundamentalist beliefs, a mistrust and outright kind of hatred of science and scientific authority, because the assumption is that any other authority system out there is going to try to replace, biblical and religious authority, and therefore should be opposed at all costs. And if you already buy that defense mechanism, if you already deploy that, then there's something to people like Tommy very disquieting about scientific authority. So that when it's presented to him, when he's asked to actually think for himself and B, take on board, with reasonable justification what people who know what they're talking about are saying, who are not religious, or in Fiona's case, she is a Christian, who are not fundamentalist. There will be a barrier up in his mind that, and I totally buy that he's a bit stupid. But a lot of it is just the retarding effect of religion on him.
Yeah.
That he isn't in and of himself retarded. He isn't completely inarticulate. He will know some of the things that he talks about. He will be able to parrot the anti-vaxxer stuff quite well. But there is this fundamental block in his mind, a defense mechanism, which will not let proper science through, because proper science is already bad because it is against the Bible.
I realize that, the calling of names on my part is kind of a cheap shot, but I feel on some level that a lot of these hangouts are just too darn polite sometimes. But I do agree with everything you're saying. Tommy Hall, well, first of all, Tommy Hall's already admitted to being a troll, right? So he's already admitted online several times that as soon as someone tells me, hey, you know what, I'm an internet troll or I'm a Christian troll or whatever, I kind of, it kind of brings into question everything that they say, because he posts a lot of ridiculous things that he wants to get attention for, and he wants to get replies, and he wants to get, under people's skin. But I do agree, as far as his that barrier that comes up, I find that it's only in these instances like evolution or stuff like that, or old work, an old Earth versus new Earth. These are the main sticking points to me, that fundamentalists have. But it's really easy for them to like I always, if you see any of my posts, I'll often post this, but they don't mind like driving a car, using a computer, using a microwave. The same scientific method goes in your cell phone. It's airplanes. You name it. The entirety of their existence is dependent upon science, and then they choose these two because it contradicts their theology on some level, and then they sort of turn off the part of their brain that this cognitive dissonance that just kicks in. It keeps them from keeping an open mind to someone like Fiona, who actually knows what she's talking about.
And it's a perfect example of how you can be a rational, scientifically minded human being and still claim to believe in the existence of God and be a practicing member of a particular religious faith. I think she's a Catholic. So for these people, the problem is that science has to be conspiratorial itself. It has to be that there are people out there trying to, because at some level I think they accept what you've just said. They realise that science works, right? Science. It's not science. Often they'll say science isn't the problem. It's the scientists. There's something defective in them. They want atheism to be true, so they filter out the evidence, as they would assume it will be, the scientific evidence for the proof the existence of God. So the problem isn't the science per se. It's the problem is the scientists, and they will support. They assume that scientists will support evolution because they have ulterior motives, not because it's true. And even though you will sit there and you will explain to them, in detail what evolution is, and they will often accept, that happens. They'll always put up a barrier and say, no, but that bit doesn't happen. You've crossed a line there. You can't say that happens. No, everything's now used to saying is nonsense. So most of them accept all of the ingredients of evolution, but they will not accept the recipe. They think, well, yeah, but if you put them together in that way, then you won't get that end result. Right. And even though we can show that is the case with evidence, the kind of stuff they can't offer for their position.
That's a great metaphor, that the ingredients and the recipe. What I hear a lot of was it's the whole micro and macro, split, or they go, oh no, that's speciation, that happens, but
one kind of thing from one kind of thing to the other. That old chestnut.
Like G-Man says, when does a dog become a non-dog or whatever? And so Then
Yeah, there's not just that. That is just they might as well. That is cue. Then that is a cue for them to just put their fingers in there and just go la 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 la. That's what that is. It's been debunked again and again and again. That's the thing. You can debunk so much of this kind of conspiratorial way of thinking, but it often finds a way of surviving and mutating and bleeding into other areas. And what you often find, especially on the internet, is the people, the skeptics that man the walls against this horde of nonsense. Often people will beat it away and then they'll go away and they'll do something else. So those people who had that knowledge, of the way to defeat that particular kind of conspiracy, and then it will resurface a few years later, and then it'll become quite virulent again, and then people will go, oh, for God's sake, do we have to deal with this again? And it's a similar kind of thing with theistic arguments that fundamentalists put forward. We will do quite a good job generally debunking their positions, but then they'll just come right back from nowhere. And I think one of the problems is that um, the old adage that knowledge is power um, is still true, but I think also we have to remember that ignorance is power, especially in the age of the internet, because the problem is the world is flooded with information. There's so much of it, and we can't properly filter it and process it. So many of us are drawn to places and people in terms of the internet who will do a good job at filtering all of the crazy, heavy stuff out and produce a simplistic, if not ignorant, narrative that we then will accept and swallow because it defends us against this constant shift. We're completely inundated with information, and I think ignorance. People who peddle ignorance are quite powerful in the age of the internet because we look for certainty, we look for some kind of stability, we look for someone who will take the burden of this endless information off our shoulders, and that's something that we have to be mindful of. I think it
the
isn't just a case that. Sorry, go ahead.
oh no, I was going to say the people always fundamentalists I hear sometimes say it's very arrogant or to know what I mean, like to think we know more than God or whatever this. I've heard that a few times. But what about the massive arrogance involved with telling people, well, they know what's in the mind of every other scientist on the planet. Now there are hundreds of thousands of people that work in the science field, and not all of them are scientists, right? But to systematically categorize out, they, when people say stuff like that, I go, what scientists where? And they really don't have an answer. They just assume that there's a bunch of guys in lab coats
Mm.
in some government facility doing weird shit. And they don't exactly know, the processes or what goes on. Most people don't even know that biology has many sub disciplines as it does. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
people just assume it's like you know one thing, and there's all these misconceptions, and they don't really go beyond what they what their first inclinations or what they want to believe in. They don't exactly go, or they pick the one or two people that are scientists, quote unquote, that agree with them and go, oh, see, these guys think differently, so they debunk the other 98% of the scientific community. It's
Yeah,
like,
I think one of the big problems I have with fundamentalists who whatever particular stripe they may be is when they talk about science they take what is probably one of science's major plus points, its ability to change and come up with new hypotheses that eventually, if they are not falsified and they have good evidence to support them, will graduate to being theories. They assume that which is one of its greatest strengths is actually a big massive weakness because it just shows that, well, everything science says is to some extent just the best of what we have now. It's not true. It's not really true. It's not really the way the world is. How can you trust scientists when they're constantly changing their minds and coming up with new bits of information? That to me is a complete misconception of what science is and the strength of science. Because science is actually quite humbling in many respects. Science has continuously, for centuries now, yeah, it has enhanced what human beings know collectively, but at the same time, it's sharpened and brought into focus the things that we don't know. Um, And again, that is jumped on by people who assume that knowledge is all about authority. It's about saying, well, this is how the world is, and just deal with it. Where science goes, well, actually, we don't know often how the world is. We know some of it, but we don't know it all. We may never know it all, and that is, again, I think, a big strength of science. But people who are minded towards these fundamentalist beliefs, that is unacceptable. You have to, even if you don't explain how you fill all the gaps, you have to at least say someone else or some other thing. Be obviously in their case, often it is God, or often it's the Illuminati, or the conspiracy, whatever it is. There's always some big other lurking behind the corner, controlling things, and it knows what's going on. Where science says not, there isn't necessarily a big other around the corner controlling everything, or not just science, but skeptical thinking is, hang on a second, no, it isn't. Often governments do terrible, stupid things, and the real sad thing about conspiratorial thinking is, if you understand a little bit about history and how about humans often behave towards each other, you don't need this big, grand conspiratorial plan to show how often people in positions of power abuse power. That's all the more reason to have better checks and balances on power. But often you'll find the people who are drawn to these beliefs are the ones who are the most susceptible to appeals from authority, and who are often the most conservative minded. And I always find that quite strange. I mean, there are some people who claim to be quite libertarian minded and get the government off our backs, but that only opens us up to other abuses of power from corporations, or from individually abusive individuals who have a lot of power. So we can have that debate about how best to stop the abuse of power and how best to check power. But often there isn't that. That doesn't happen. That's too difficult. Instead, it's much better to be hysterical and have almost this kind of naive view that there's just if only that the puppet masters who controlled everything behind everything were just good and like us, we who are guardians of knowledge. And we can't discount the narcissism that comes along with people who believe in conspiracy theories, because they can't just accept the mundane, straightforward explanations for why the world is the way it is. There has to be some grand plan behind it all that only they or a few other people like them have seen, and that makes them special somehow. Well, no, you're not special. The idea you figured it all out and everyone else is just a bit stupid. That's a very attractive idea for a lot of people to have, and it's difficult to stop that. And I think often it is these people who have this naive assumption that if only we could sort out the Illuminati, if we could stop the Illuminati, then the world would be a utopia. Well, no, it wouldn't, because we have no reason to believe there is an Illuminati at all. But there are elite people in positions of power who abuse that power, and that's always been the case, and perhaps always will be the case. But you certainly aren't going to stop it by, going out and buying more guns, or by not taking vaccines, or by, having a bunker in a garden. It's just not. It's not going to solve anything. What is going to solve it is being critical, being skeptical of when governments or people in positions of power put forward, particular plans to do this or that. You say no, I don't accept that. I don't accept your authority. That's the way to defeat this. It's not going to be through just sweep this romantic idea of sweeping away the lizard people.
Yeah, right. They're like, I'll show them. I won't take vaccines, But I find that it's a lot of people are very uncomfortable with not knowing.
Yep.
And they need to have that certainty. And I've run across some of the things that you said about fundamentalists when it comes to them saying stuff like, well, science always changes, or this and that. And what I tell them is, I'm like, so you have a information where you didn't have information before, or you had information, you learned something new about it, and so you revised or changed your conclusion. And I would ask them, is this an issue to you? And if they say yes, I go, I just described learning. So if you're against, revising your position based on new information, you're against learning, because that's exactly what's going on. Science is a self-correcting method, as we all know, and the fact that when new facts arise, it revises our conclusions. It's a good thing. People are just not comfortable with that. People need to have certainty, and so the people that I feel that are most susceptible to that are people that are, really religious, or they really like. I know a couple of people, and the most religious ones are the ones that believe in chemtrails, and they're the 9/11 thing, and I can see that they're kind of susceptible to that sort of influence.
Hmm.
And I can't really, I don't know how to have a conversation with someone like that. They start talking to me about it, and I just kind of go like, and just I back away, because you just go, no, I don't think lizard people run the government, or I don't know, I don't think there's a global conspiracy to make people sick, I it just I just can't buy into it. And as a side note, the Tommy Hall thing where he said he'd rather not take vaccines than get Ebola.
Hmm.
If that's not an advertisement for natural selection, I don't know what is.
I think that was one of the things that was said actually in relation to Tommy Hall, and you might be right. He might just be a massive troll. But I think one of the problems is often there is an acceptance by these people that they're not in the serious business of offering up a proper argument. It is just shutting up the mouths of disbelievers. So by any means necessary, obfuscate, derail. That's the point of their engagement. It's not to offer up a reasoned, rational, well evidenced position. They're just not that bothered in that. So it could be the way. I think there is just this. We are moving towards a position where these people, they're not just pros. They're not just people who are actually maybe even atheists making this stuff up. They are just theists who have just decided, what, we can't have a good proper discourse and still maintain our absolute beliefs in literal truths in the Bible. So we're just going to go in there and we're just going to disrupt the conversation. We're just going to derail it, and that's kind of the business that they're in. But I'd maybe doesn't really, maybe for him the whole point is to just bash science. He doesn't like science because it conflicts with his fundamentalist beliefs. So he's just gonna ride any horse that is going in the opposite direction from science. And I think a lot of it is down to authority. Fundamentalists often care more about authority than they do about certainty, because often when you poke the claims to certainty, you'll find they're not even substantiated with proper beliefs about why these things are certain. They just accept that the authority figure has some certainty. So
Yeah.
what they don't like about science is that science puts itself forward as a figure of authority on matters of which it is authoritative, but it doesn't act like a traditional authority figure. It doesn't tell them obvious prescriptions of how to behave. And if you've got quite a slavish mindset where you assume that what is important is that there is some big other there that dictates how you should all behave and interact with each other, and how you can orientate yourself towards it. So the Christian has a relationship with God. Well, skeptics don't have a relationship towards science because there's not some personal being to have a relationship towards. So they're mistrustful of a position of authority which is constantly changing. They think that disqualifies it from being authoritative, when actually, if anything, it just enhances it. So it is just a completely different mindset, and we are just talking past each other. Often when we point to how the way that you show if something in history of science has been wrong, is usually it'll be a scientist who'll prove it's wrong. It isn't a conspiracy theorist or a theist who disprove scientific hypotheses. It's a scientist. So you should all be all on board with it, because the best way of disproving the positions that you want disproved, like evolution, is going to be through science. It's not going to be through saying that all of the science anyway that you don't agree with is just a conspiracy, and it's just, you've already lost the debate.
I when I talk to people in in my personal life, and they have a problem that the reason they're so religious or fundamentalist, because they have problems with evolution or stuff like that. I'll even eliminate evolution from the equation. I'm just like, okay, assume evolution is entirely wrong, and we have no concept of how old the Earth is. Okay, now demonstrate your God exists, and and you realize they don't have anything but the idea of bashing evolution. It's really it's really all they have, and they seem to think that if they can somehow poke enough holes in evolution, that somehow their particular God exists. And
Yeah, I've always enjoyed that one, because again, I think it's the assumption that, well, there are two authority figures in the room, there's science and God, and if you can show that science, really is full of problems and is constantly disagreeing with itself and have things that you just can't properly answer, then that means that the only authority figure that's left standing is God. But if you in proper rational discourse, you don't prove one possible alternative hypothesis by eliminating one hypothesis. So even if you can show that science is wrong on matters of evolution or an old Earth, it doesn't get you to proving that the creation account is correct. And often that is just something that these fundamentalists just don't realize. They'll just go, "Huh, I've just shown you that your position's wrong. Well, therefore mine is left, mine's correct, mine's left standing." And
right,
it, you know it happens all the time, and it beggars belief, because you are more than entitled to adopt a super skeptical stand against things like evolution and the various methods that we use to prove the theory is correct, or to prove other naturalistic facts about the formation of the Earth and solar system and the universe. You're more than entitled to do that, but you can't then completely abandon all those high skeptical standards when it comes to your particular account, because you
right,
have to apply the same standards if you want to be consistent and not to be seen to just be indulging in special pleading. Um, so often that's the case with conspiracy theories as well. Is they will go all out for the official account, but will be very, very poor when it comes to actually defending their own positions, and they will just assume that by showing that the official accounts of how things happened, at, say for instance 9/11, where we don't know absolutely everything, we haven't pieced together absolutely we have such an enormous amount of detail about how things happened on that day, but we don't know absolutely everything. There are still a few mysteries and things, as you would expect with any event that happens. You can never fully reconstruct it. There's always going to be something that escapes a full, total, and comprehensive understanding of what happened. But we can do our best. Uh, but the assumption is, well, if I can show that it isn't fully comprehensive and everything is in place, then that's wrong and I'm right, and that's just really, to anyone who's thinking skeptically and thinking clearly, you're more than, like I say, you're more than welcome to go against official stories. And in some cases, conspiracists they'll always try to bring up things like, I think there's a Gulf of Tonkin incident where a U.S. ship fired on another U.S. ship to make it look like it was the Viet Cong. I think that's what happened, something along those lines. They'll always point to something where, with Watergate or things like that, where there are evidences of shockingly governments lie, and they'll say, well, that's fine, you can do that, but that doesn't then validate everything else, or should I say, it doesn't invalidate everything else that the government or the United States government has done since. There are, again, WMDs in Iraq. Fair enough. It was a load of bullshit, but it doesn't mean that the U.S. government was behind 9/11 and the U.S. government created ISIS. Um, it just doesn't automatically follow. You have to present a case. You have to give evidence, just like any other position. So that's my thinking on it. Just
yeah,
if you're going to be skeptical consistently. That's the lesson to take from this. Don't just drop the skeptical ball whenever you've arrived at your favorite position. So just just keep being skeptical, and you'll probably be all right.
I'm not sure if you saw that picture I posted up. I kept messing it up.
I,
Did you?
I don't know if I was actually looking at the screen, so I was just a bit distracted. But oh yes, I remember that. I remember that on my G Plus stream. That was
Yeah,
good.
that came through. Again, I reposted it, and yeah, I agree. I know it's about that time to wrap up. So, um, congratulations on another fascinating show. We did pretty good with just the two of us, I think. So, uh,
Yeah, it was good.
this
It was
was
fun.
pretty interesting. So that's our show. I gotta say, as my final words, I agree with Fox, obviously. My response is, like, as I always say, much shorter and less eloquent than he, but with the same persistent scrutiny, if you're going to be a skeptic, should be done all the way around. If you want to consider yourself a proper skeptic, to me, I know that's skirting the no Scotsman fallacy, but um, how do you call yourself a skeptic if you turn off that skepticism? It's kind of it's kind of a tricky thing. But with me, I get accused of not having an open mind, but I like to think that I've actually looked into most of this stuff, probably more than the person that's actually accusing me of not having an open mind. So um, I I pretty much research everything. I don't. If something comes up in science, like I just got something in my Google Plus feed that said the Big Bang. There's another model, a cosmological model that come out that says I read it briefly, but the title says the universe may be ever eternally contracting and expanding. And
Yeah,
so
I've seen
the
that.
Big Bang wasn't exactly, you know what I mean? Like, it's an alternative and
It's
explains some of the things in physics they had an issue with. I didn't get into the article though. I've yet to read it,
yeah, I've skim read that. I'll
but
probably try and look at it more in detail. But yeah, it's fascinating, and it would be quite an eloquent um, hypothesis. Would it true? It'd be an interesting way around the assumptions of an origin of the universe being finite in the past. If the universe was in some sense eternal, that'd be quite a nice idea for me to think of. But I'm not just going to blindly accept that. And
right,
if I get into a debate about cosmological arguments, I'm not going to go, well, science shows that the universe is just always in a cycle and it's always existed, and therefore there's no need for a god. You can't just do that. You've got to if you're gonna say, well, actually that theory has some water, it holds some water, some weight behind it. You have to say why, and why the scientific consensus falls behind that theory. At the moment, it doesn't, so we can't say that. But who knows? In 10, 15 years' time, where we'll be with that.
but the idea is that, as a science-minded person like myself, I'm not going to look at it and blindly accept it. My due diligence. I look into it, and I know this is. I haven't got into it, but I know this is kind of a new hypothesis that's trying to gain some legs, I would imagine. Um, but the idea that I haven't written one off and went full tilt on the other one, I keep my options open, and that's kind of to me what a person with an open mind would do. And I hold out the hope on some level that they do that they can somehow demonstrate this eternal universe thing, because it would make Trey Jadlow's head explode. It would make his whole argument fall.
Yeah, I can imagine
So,
that one.
well, anyway, all right. Well, I think we can call it. It's about an hour.
Yep, I've got to go.
Uh, I will see everyone. Well, we will see everyone next week, and I hope you all have a good weekend.
Yep,
Bye,
you too.
Fox. See you, bud.
All right, see you. Bye.